Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Forbes India CFO Dialogues in partnership with the Institute of Management Accountants, IMA. Such a pleasure to have all joining us today. At the outset, from all of us at Forbes India, let me begin by thanking you all for taking time out to be with us, despite your busy schedule. To our audience who've joined us today, today marks a year since India imposed a lockdown amidst the raging coronavirus pandemic. And we can only hope that life has since returned to normalcy for you. We joined this afternoon by Ms. Sandhya Sriram, the Vice President, Global Head of Audit and Risks, Wipro Enterprises; Jyotsna Sharma, the CFO, Bridgestone India Private Limited; Megha Chopra, Country Business Head, Global Commercial Services at American Express; Ritu Rekha, Partner and Leader, Finance Transformation at PwC; and Hanadi Khalife, Senior Director, MEA and India Operations at IMA. Thank you, ladies, for joining us at the Forbes India CFO Dialogues in partnership with the Institute of Management Accountants, IMA. I must admit that this is the first time we have an all-women's panel at the Forbes India CFO Dialogues, and we can only hope that it's only the first of many more to come. So we are 2 months into a new year, and a year since the government announced a nationwide lockdown, something many of us were seeing for the first time in our lifetime. Business activity was halted overnight, disrupting supply chains and sales, which created an instant liquidity crisis for businesses big and small. Job losses and pay cuts were rampant, and there was so much uncertainty about where life was headed. While digital transformation and businesses going online remained top priority, cash flow remained crucial to ensure business continuity. However, a year later, the world's largest vaccination program is currently underway in India, and businesses are returning to normalcy, providing some light at the end of the tunnel. Across companies who also have a role in kickstarting the economy, customer preferences, employee engagement, management styles, and the ecosystem have certainly undergone some transformation. But along the way, the priority for many companies have also changed from optimizing cash reserves to setting up a cash war room, a cross-functional task force that would be key to reviewing company-wide situation in order to remain on top of the game. There's also the growing realization on skilling employees, bridging the gender gap, and newer ways of doing business. Reskilling, which has been a necessity for many years, nothing drove home its urgency like the pandemic. While many companies were consciously working towards improving the diversity score, several studies suggest that women were disproportionately impacted with job losses and salary cuts during the COVID-19 crisis. So let me begin today's discussion by asking our panelists on their opening comment on how they look at the past year and what are the key changes you are seeing in your line of business. So let me start with Sandhya and then move around.
Thank you, Manu. It is great to be here. And I didn't realize it marks 1 year of the pandemic. And when the pandemic started, none of us even thought that we'll celebrate an anniversary and still stabilizing. For us in our line of business, when the pandemic first started, I think the biggest worry, and it still continues to be, is people safety. We are in the manufacturing business, and we have to find safe ways of bringing our people to work and delivering what our customers need. The second aspect, of course, is to keep the supply chain up and running. Every day is a new kind of situation. So, for example, say you take a typical forecasting model. You have a standard lead time and then the MRP plans, and you really can't predict either shortage of components or supplier availability. So, which has made it very imperative for companies to build dynamism in their planning engines, things like more deeper third-party data in our planning engines, etc. So, it's a very different way of looking at operations at supply chain. Closer home in finance, I think really the value of finance as co-pilots, delivering top line, bottom line, but most importantly, like you said, cash. How can we conserve cash? How can we create cash war room, in your words? That became the lifeblood for us. And closest home for me as a risk leader, I think the entire landscape of risk management, it changed significantly. I think exposures increased, credit risks, insurance risk, cash flow, cyber risks, lists can go on. The approach to risk management became more dynamic than static, as preparedness, which was always the bedrock of an effective risk management, was completely thrown out of the window. The new catchphrase became agility. So for me, in summary, the past 1 year has probably packed in changes of a decade of, developments into one small time bomb and dropped it on an unsuspecting world. But what I want to end with is that the world has stepped up to this challenge remarkably. Thank you.
Jyotsna, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak onto this panel and the people out here. Uh, I guess I belong to a very hardcore manufacturing world, the automobile industry, which is known for mobility. So the world keeps on moving with the tires that we manufacture. But last 1 year has been an unbelievable change in so many aspects of working. And the few things which I would like to highlight here, what changed over the pandemic? If I were to take the essence of people, uh, people's safety, as was mentioned, is of course a prime concern. But where we saw the real shift happening is care, concern, empathy, the trust levels. All of this went up immensely over the last 1 year. So wherever you are at whichever level, doesn't matter whether you are a management person or working down the road. There was equal amount of connect and concern for each person in the organization. Of course, beyond the organization, whether it is family or society, we saw a similar connect being built up over the pandemic, which obviously would not have happened had it been a normal situation. So that is from a people's perspective. But coming back to the organization, I guess last 1 year did fast track multiple years from the background. I mean, the importance of agility, the importance of focus on cost, the importance of being alert and reactive to all possible changes, the importance of transitioning your business models moved at an unbelievable pace. And no one could be left behind in that run because this was no single person's, no single function's role. It meant to be a multifunctional task to be able to sail out of this situation. And I don't see the pandemic is over in any way. We are we're listening about the first wave coming in India, or the second wave in India, and the third wave in Europe. So it looks like this is going to be a way of life for future. And it's been a good experience to me in many ways. I guess we've got challenged to test our abilities or test our experiences over years. And this has been keeping you younger, has been keeping you on all the time, is what I would say. So it's been a great experience, I would say, overall.
Megha, your opening thoughts on how things have changed in the last 1 year, in your line of business. I assume quite drastic changes.
Hi, Manu. Thank you. Thanks for having me. First of all, and you're right. The last year has brought about just so many unprecedented changes in the way we work, in the way we interact with our teams, in the way we engage with our customers, and of course, that's brought about maturity levels across all of these levels. I totally agree with Jyotsna and Sandhya to say that I don't think the last 12 months look like 12 months anymore. They are like, the joke around in our circles is that we can easily add couple of years to our resumes because as leaders and as organizations, we have gone through multiple cycles of evolution during this time because this was so unprecedented in terms of its scale and the way it was prolonged. I think from a personal standpoint, I felt completely aligned with what Jyotsna was saying. It brought people together significantly at all levels. Empathy was very high. And at a personal level, I also felt that a lot of people looked around for purpose. And they wanted to also identify purpose of organizations at that time, and then there was significant alignment of your purpose and your organization's purpose, and I think that drove a lot of collaboration during these times, which is very, very necessary. And probably that was one of the key reasons why a lot of the organizations really marched out of this pandemic, becoming more resilient and more strong. I think from the business that I belong to, particularly talking about the payments industry, I think it saw the colors of all industry, because at the end of the day, we are like an overlay on all industries. So when the economy is booming, business is booming, and when the economy slows down, obviously payments and collections take their toll. So I think we saw a huge pivoting to survival, then to sustenance, and now towards emergence. So a lot of pivots coming onto the business, and lots of learning that we kind of now, that's going to become like the handbook for leadership and organizational change and future proofing for many, many years to come.
I think we'll talk about the pivoting and the learnings and all of that in just a bit. But let me bring in Ritu here. Ritu, you work with, I assume, with a lot of companies across the spectrum. What has been your thinking about what's happened in the past 1 year, especially in terms of how businesses have undergone some sort of transformation?
Firstly, let me just say my co-panelists here as a microcosm of the client environment that we see, what we've heard the CFOs speak. And we consultants are very good at applying patterns sometimes, when you look back. And maybe it's useful actually to think about a year and step back and think about what really happened. I think there was a tremendous crisis response, right, almost in the first 2-3 months, and not only business crisis, but humanitarian and societal crisis, where everyone came together and therefore discovered new things of ourselves as not only as professionals but as citizens, right, as co-inhabitants, really. But the second part was really, as the business, the growing realization that this ain't going to go away in a few weeks. I think the conversation has turned from a CFO standpoint, it turned to funding, to liquidity, to preservation, to cash flow, in some cases to balance sheet restructuring. And really taking a hard, good, long look at the assets and the liability side, in addition to P&L, and really that's where the conversation was. I'm happy to say that I think, and you began, Manu, your opening comments at an optimistic note. And while, the sectoral realities really differ, you could argue that hospitality and aviation or industrial products or consumer and retail or financial service are very different ends of the spectrum. But in general, I'll tell you, I think a couple of my takeaways today is that the quality of the conversation is very much around numbers, but also the quality of those numbers, right? People care about sustainable growth. People care about sustainable supply chain, resilient supply chain, caring about how to upskill people, how to really accelerate digital. These are all conversations that have substantially evolved, accelerated, and also changed. I would conclude by saying we did a CEO survey. This was worldwide in January, February. And believe it or not, amongst the top 3 things that CEOs care about is climate. And who would have thought? Who would have thought a few years ago that that would become amongst the top 3 concerns of the CEOs today? And therefore, the CFOs and the procurement officers and the supply chain officers and so on. But I think a sustainable planet, a profitable planet, the nature of growth, the quality of growth, all these things are now very, very important conversations post-COVID.
Hanadi, your views on, especially from where you sit, from a global point of view, what are your takeaways from what the last year has been?
So let me pick up where Ritu left, and I'm very glad to hear that the fact that now the priority on CFO's agenda are the 3 Ps, the people, the planet, and the profit. So that's an amazing shift that actually probably the pandemic expedited that shift. But that also comes from the perspective that the pandemic has changed a mindset and the way we do business, not from a from a core business side, but from the people side. And that's extremely important. The fact that we are, I would say, moving to social capitalism in the sense that companies are a social entity, and we have responsibilities towards our employees, but also the environment that we operate in. So I think that that was a very good shift that this pandemic has accelerated. From a global perspective, we've also seen the double side effect of globalization. IMA is a global association. We have offices around the world, members around the world. So the good side of that was that countries, recovered at different paces. So that would kind of bring some balance to the overall operations and bottom line of the business. But we also face the disruption in our value chain because we are a service company. We have an entity. We have the CMA certification, and we provide lots of resources for our members. But also we part of our value chain or supply chain are the training center, the testing centers. So we've seen that even if our probably the impact on our core business was not hit a lot, because again, during crisis, people tend to, and we've seen that trend of upskilling, reskilling. But because our supply chain was disrupted, people couldn't do the training, people couldn't, go to testing center. So also, reevaluate the value chain is an important also aspect of this post pandemic, and I tend to agree with what everybody has said, that while there is light at the end of the tunnel, but we are still far from a full recovery period, and I think we should still try to operate in a crisis, post-crisis mode.
Let me bring in, Sandhya and Jyotsna here. I'm just taking off from what Ritu and Hanadi also spoke about. In terms of the quality of the conversations, around balance sheet, funding, cash flow, and all of that. So basically, for you guys, as CFOs, as finance heads, has the role changed, from what you were doing probably before and what it is now? Jyotsna maybe can go first, and then I'll ask Sandhya to come.
Yeah. So has the role changed? I would say the role has not just changed, but the existing role of a CFO has become even more visible in terms of being able to contribute much more than before. And what do I mean by saying that? Initially, CFOs were looking much more towards, let's say, controls, being custodians of the balance sheet, or being able to ensure that the finance, that is the cash or net working capital, is rolling fine. So there was a lot of financial paraphernalia to the role of a CFO. But if you see what changed over the pandemic, it was not just that the CFO needed to understand all these aspects of doing business. Every member, not just of the management team, but of the senior management team, needed to understand how important and effectively each one needs to speed up the contribution. Cash was king. To be able to get our money from our customers faster, to be able to use every single penny on the shop floor much more effectively, to be able to stress out your machines much more effectively, to be able to get the best out of your manpower. So you see, it was not a single person's role to control the financials or to drive the financials in this situation. And it was critically important that the CFO became a part of the system rather than being a function in the system. At the same time, the CFOs had to really recognize the fast transition from the traditional businesses or the business models, moving on to digitalization, moving on to automations, moving on to being able to very quickly give solutions, whether it is fitting in the framework of accounting standards or into the IT systems, to be able to cope up with these changes, because it was very clearly realized that the person who catches on in this particular phase would be able to sail much more faster in the business houses ahead. So I guess overall, from a manufacturing organization perspective, you had to do your job as a CFO. Budgeting became a nightmare because every week you're making a new estimate of your budget. The pandemic moving ahead, first 15 days lockdown, next 1 month lockdown, and then. So making cash flows and making projections was a day-to-day routine. So you had to find out methods, how to do it faster, how to be more predictable. But what was the best part of this whole thing was when we moved towards the last quarter, business started showing up like never before. Like, for example, in our business in Bridgestone, over the past 20 years, we've hit the best volumes of sales in the last quarter of 20. Now, this sets a different expectation moving ahead. And you suddenly see from a absolutely tight cost control, a tight balance sheet, there's a lot more expectation to gain much more pace. So you want to spend, you want to do marketing, you want to put resources, you want to get people, you want to get skills. And then how do you strike that balance? Because this is such an uncertain time. These changes, are they going to last? Is it going to be such a dynamic up and down? And how do you cope up with this? And you cannot catch on with this situation unless you participate with your broader team. And when I mean team, it's not just internal team. You have to be very closely having your ears to the ground, be connected with the market, your team, the vendor system, and your competition to know what's happening. So I guess overall, as a CFO, it was not playing the role of a CFO, but with the 30 experience which you carry in the background, you played a much broader, wiser role of letting go and letting in. Like, let go of the old practices. Let's try to catch up with the new things along with others, is what I would say about the pandemic having driven through this phase.
Sandhya, would you agree? I mean, is that how it has been for you as well?
Absolutely. I think Jyotsna covered it well. I think the role of the CFO had expanded, not just, like Jyotsna nicely elaborated in cash, in thinking, but being able to spearhead the agility and adaptability in the organization, and how fast can finance respond to that. So, for example, how agile are our pricing models adapting to the new normal? Each customer may have a different need. Some may need, maybe somebody may be in need of cash, some may be in need of short-term cost leverage. Looking inward, how do we variabilize cost? How quickly are we able to build these into our pricing templates, for example? Take another example, say FP&A. Nobody wants to wait till the end of the month to see the profit and loss account. People want quick information. And how is the finance organization be able to respond? How fast, say, is the treasury team able to sift all the bank balances and pull them and apply them quickly to the needs of the business? So really, finance has been spearheading business agility. And finance can spearhead business agility only at the intersection of three things, I say. One is their core technical skills, business insights, and technology. Technical skills are still getting more commoditized, but being able to create value for business. In fact, they say it's no longer a CFO, it's a CVO. And finance has to create no longer bean counters, but value creators, as they say. Finance has had to create value, and finance teams have learned. And that way, they have made themselves, like Jyotsna said, an integral member in the operation of the business and not just a function. So it has been a really transformatory period for finance, but the journey has just begun.
Absolutely. Transformative period for finance, but something that Jyotsna had also mentioned earlier was how, in terms of sales, it's been a great time for them. Megha, when you sort of look at customers and things like that, has the customer preference really undergone some significant changes? And what must organizations do in order to sort of cater to those changes now?
Very pertinent, Manu. Yes, with the pandemic coming through, I think one of the biggest things businesses had to be agile about was customer preferences. Especially on the B2C side, if you see, a lot of online digitization was the key word, the buzzword. And I think Jyotsna also mentioned about that. So how do you kind of ensure that when 70-80% of the population in the country, and when we hit the pandemic, almost 95% of people wanted to spend digitally. So how do you kind of capture that demand and that moving, changing customer preference? On the B2B side also, we saw so much change happening in the landscape, where we saw that the counterparties for a B2B business, whether it is your supplier or your buyer, also wanted to really come out with more and more digital options. They wanted businesses to kind of think slightly more aggressively around avoiding all sorts of friction or paper or anything which causes any sort of cyber risk or fraud risk or anything which kind of gave them non-transparency of data. Because, at the end of the day, what this period did was brought about data and analytics to the forefront for all CXOs. CFOs, of course, were the evangelists for data. Like Sandhya and Jyotsna were mentioning, all that they were able to achieve as transformation officers in the journey on processing or on the journey of payments or receivables ultimately had to come together beautifully in data, and that was really huge in terms of decision making. So we feel that when you talk about customer journeys, it is very deeply integrated to digitization and then the data attached to that. So yes, a lot of interesting models came into play.
Let me bring in Ritu here. I'm sorry, can you hear me now? So let me bring in Ritu here. When we look at a post-COVID world, and this is something everybody spoke about in terms of monitoring real time on the balance sheet, on profit and loss, and everything agile supply chains. Are businesses really taking lessons from this pandemic, and the senior leadership taking a serious look at what's happened and entrenching them into the business models?
Yeah, I think let me just say a couple of things, Manu. I think one is, we're very much still in a COVID world in a way. And therefore, the working models are still getting evolved. I think many companies are, thinking about what the future will be like in terms of workplace, workforce, and work itself. So I think all those three dimensions are being looked at. I would say 2-3 very heartening things have happened, right? Because of the sheer scale and the speed of this crisis that we are all coming through together. The appetite for experimentation, I would argue, has increased. The appetite for doing something today, and seeing if it will work, and then taking a roadmap from there for the next 2-3 years, I think has increased. Digital acceleration, I think some of my co-panelists were talking about that whole idea of driving enterprise value, right? Whatever that value may mean, for some it is growth in a particular direction, for some it is just unlocking value from the balance sheet, for some it will be new kind of stakeholders, for some it will be alliances and partnerships to really accelerate some of their growth journeys, whatever that may be. But I think there is a tremendous appetite for experimentation and for looking at the road ahead. I think the second thing I would say is that the arsenal and the armory that we have, I think and we talk a lot about digital, but I think we equally need to talk about the capabilities. I think there is a tremendous recognition that tools and technologies has to be in the hands of the people who are excited to use it, who are inspired to use it, and therefore also have not just your people, but also your alliances and partnerships all synced up and in line to really apply that to the kind of growth problems or profitability problems or opportunities that the companies have. And I think the second thing that has happened is that there is this whole
if I can use a consulting jargon, the ecosystem investments, whether it's in people or in the alliances or technology partnerships and so on, that's happening in a much more accelerated way. The third thing is, I think there's a huge amount of pragmatism, and there is an impatience, right, to see fast results. I think the kind of appetite is that give me some lead indicators and let's start changing something on the ground fast, even if it is small today, and we can see a road ahead, in 1 year, 2 years, and so on. The impact has to be very fast, very visible, and let's start changing things on the ground. So I think there's a lot of I would say evolution in the nature of the transformation itself. So on one side, the appetite is there. The second side, there is an impatience to see fast results. On the third side, there's a realization that not every answer can be found within the company and within your current set. And therefore, let's start leveraging the best that the world has to offer. And there are ways to do it today.
Before I go into reskilling of employees and all of that, Hanadi, what do you reckon?
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was just about to also comment on the lessons learned, because I think there were too many lessons learned from the COVID, and I think the most important one, I think we all learned that we can operate in a faster and leaner way, that we can redesign our operations and procedures in a much faster way. I think there was a stigma around how long it would take certain things to change. And that pandemic taught us that we can be leaner and more agile. And I think a very important also aspect, another stigma I think that was removed, is the fact that people can be productive working from home. This whole shift to work from home and staying productive, I think, will impact also the future of work and how we're gonna see work going on. I think also from the government aspect, the regulatory aspect, at least I can talk here, I'm based in Dubai, in the UAE, you can see how active the government is in issuing policies and engaging with the private sector to make sure we come up with a recovery faster. So I think the regulatory front is also being more active, which obviously would expedite in general how businesses operate. Of course, we talked about the upskilling and reskilling that is now put more on the forefront of businesses.
Absolutely. I think Jyotsna wanted to mention something. Jyotsna, please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just got. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Sorry, I just got interrupted in between with the network. So basically, when I was listening to the other views about, post-pandemic, would there be a new norm? And, I have a take on this, particularly if you see human nature. It takes long to change your habits. Unless until you're pushed hard to do those changes, whether it is cost consciousness within organizations or people sensitization, it doesn't come easily as a culture. If I were to look at, can work from home continue successfully forever? There will be a lot more question marks, because many of us are already wanting to get back to work, because it's always the grass is green on the other side. And we have seen what it means to work from home. It's working 4 times more. Can we empower more? Yes, when you're sitting away, you could perhaps empower more. But generally, empowering does not come that easily. And I don't know whether this new norm would change towards cultures of empowerment, culture of living with bare minimum budgets. Would we want to spend carefully so that for future such situations, we are naturally prepared for it? And I don't mean organizations, I also mean individuals. Like, would there be a shift in the spend habits? I really have my own doubts whether with one pandemic or an impact of 1 year, would everything change for future? I think it's too early to say much about it. and to really experience as we go ahead.
I think Megan might have a view on that.
So it's a bit of a controversial tangent Jyotsna has kind of provided, but I kind of agree and disagree. On the agree part, yes, there will be pockets which possibly will not see a permanent change. But on the disagree part, I feel that businesses and personally individuals have seen a lot of value in making some fundamental changes to the way they operate. Purely because I think, as you've gone through these 12 months of transition, you've realized that flexibility, variability, and having to have that spring kind of movement, okay, today I can really kind of flex my muscle to stretch out, but, tomorrow I may need to kind of control that asset depending on what the volatility situation demands. I think there have been very key investments, like people spoke about, on people, whether it is reskilling, whether it's bringing about a collaborative attitude in the organization. Second, I feel a lot of investment has been made around process. I don't think any organization or any CXO today wants to have a situation when they don't have the right streamlining and automation and digitization in place. Everybody wants to think digital first. Now, it's a choice that was a boardroom agenda for a 3-5 year roadmap. Now it's kind of significantly accelerated. And the last piece I see where I think definitely there'll be leaps and bounds of change, and we've already seen that, is technology. I think Ritu mentioned that there are so many new technologies that CEOs and CXOs wanted to adopt, thought that it was good to have. Now it is like must have. So I feel on people, process, technology, there will be fundamental changes because short-term fixes really didn't work during this time. You had to really tweak something to bring about something that would make you so much more agile. But yeah, there would be some things which will probably come back in terms of preferences and all of that.
Yeah, I know, I know the argument. We are creature of habits, right? We like to go back to our old habits or old nature. But I think when we experience something better, we also want to adopt that new thing in our lifestyle. A blend, this flexibility, we've seen that it works, like the work from home, whether full-time or part-time, but at least integrating that component. Our members or customers' experience have changed, and I think will change with the digitization. That change, happened even before the pandemic. We were all talking what are the impact of the fourth industrial revolution. The pandemic just expedited all these things. But I think the shift in consumer behavior, a shift in the way of we do business, that's actually the beauty of the lesson learned. Yes, we are creatures of habits, but I think we can easily integrate additional best practices to the way we do business and the way we as consumers behave as well.
Let me ask you this, Anadi. In that sense, how do we sort of build a sustainable recovery here? I mean, going from now where we are, I mean, we don't know what's really the future going to look like. But how do we build a sort of sustainable recovery from here?
I think most importantly, again, is look at the lesson learned. And I think all my co-panelists mentioned the importance of liquidity, of cash flow, of a strong balance sheet. I think these should still be a priority as we move on to the new normal, if you want. Of course, integrating digitization, automation, these are extremely crucial to the future of any organization. And we've seen, actually, I was reading a McKinsey report that estimates that $98 billion would be spent on AI in 2023 against only 38 billion. So we've seen that the importance of digitization, the importance of being more data driven, is extremely important as we build our resilience and as we build for our future, making sure we are using the data, be it internal or external, in the right way.
Sandhya, do you think organizations are sort of taking on or more embracing artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all of that, and really leveraging technology the way they should be doing today?
So I think technology is only a tool or a mode to solve a business problem. So I think the agility or the value that the organizations bring comes from the fact that are they able to rightly identify the business problem and find the right solution to fix that business problem. So sometimes it's very very fashionable to say I'm using AI. Is there a need for AI for that particular business problem? For example, many companies want to do RPA on business processes. We say that we cannot do fifth degree automation on first degree processes. So does the process have the maturity to implement an RPA? So I am someone while I believe technology is the key, technology is only the tool. So you need to know what you're killing. You're killing an elephant or a mosquito, and use that right tool to go after the problem that we are trying to address. So I feel that that maturity is evolving in organizations, especially in today, because cash is tight, and the need for automation is far higher. We spoke about, a few panelists spoke about how consumers are moving digital. In fact, there is a McKinsey study which said that we have vaulted 5 years in terms of customer and consumer and business digital adoption, just 8 weeks into pandemic. So that means that the focus of what tools to use to digitize and how do you conserve cash and prioritize on where you want to focus your digitization efforts, I think pandemic has taught people how to go about it. So I feel that as we go more and more into this journey, whether pandemic or not, we've learned a new way of doing things. We've learned to build a vaccine which takes 9 years and 9 months. So that's again, the right use of technology in the right place. So businesses will build on what they've learned from the pandemic and apply in the larger context to create better value for their business, according to me.
Ritu, let me bring in, and to the point that Sandhya mentioned, about, and this is something you had mentioned earlier also, that we want faster results now. But, and amidst all this fad about, artificial intelligence, machine learning, digitization, and things like that, will people be sort of compelled to doing it, and especially when they don't have the maturity to be doing that? How do you see this sort of playing out in the future?
So, Manu, the way I look at it is that firstly, one has to have a coherent digital strategy, right? I think there is a realization that standalone tools that, one can just shop for, is not the answer. And I think that the world has discovered not only in the COVID year, but over the last 2-3 years. Now, if you want to make a digital strategy, and for the reason of not just efficiency and productivity, but now for resilience, because a digital enterprise is just more resilient. It can withstand, this change of work models and this sudden change of scenarios and so on. I would say one shouldn't be afraid to experiment. I don't think one needs to wait to say that, look, I will only, let's say, do this kind of a tech and later I'll do that kind of a tech. Be very, very sharp, be very, very clear in defining your use cases and defining what are you scaling and what are you experimenting with. And I think it's perfectly fine to have this kind of a thinking in the enterprise saying, look, we will experiment and innovate on this set of technologies with this set of use cases. We will go out and hire the best in the world and the best expertise that the world has to offer in this one. However, in this one, I really want to scale and I want to have a very, very measured way of scaling and a risk-free, relatively risk-free way of scaling this, right? Because I'm now ready to roll it out enterprise-wide. So I think that's what I would say. The second thing I would just like to say, perhaps repeating a little bit, but technology and capabilities go together. This is not just about choosing your technology and tools. This is about a coherent approach of how will people use that technology, how will people collaborate together to use this technology, because the current tools, the current set of technologies, whether it enables people or it empowers them, as the case may be, right? And I think there is a very clear realization that both can happen. People have to work together for companies to realize value from there. And, we forget that change, that much used word of change management, people have to be inspired and motivated to use that technology to drive value for the enterprise. And I think it's just such an important pillar, not to let technology just become a standalone conversation, but to together bring it, to drive the kind of outcomes that clients need. And I think successful companies do that, and very, very well.
We sort of running short on time, but I want to ask this because we have an all-women panel here. But how do you sort of reckon, with the pandemic, early on when we used to have conversations, with this whole work from home and all of that, there's a line of thought that there'll be more participation for women in the workforce now as a result of this. Are we likely to see more women into the workforce now as a result of what's gone on, and especially in leadership positions? What are your thoughts? Maybe I can start with Jyotsna and then get views from everyone else as well.
Yeah, basically, it's a very interesting question whether we'll see more women in leadership position. We have a long way to go to see more women in leadership position in any sector of the country. But when it comes to diversity and gender diversity inclusion, there are definitive steps which have already been started to be taken by organizations. Not just because of the pandemic, but they realized in this pandemic to be able to have a balanced thought process, to be able to use the entire talent pool, it is equally important to get the remainder half of talent pool into the workforce. So we will certainly see preferences, priorities, policies being framed to encourage more diversity in organizations. But I have been in industry for 25 years now. Almost the only lady in management position in most of these organizations, in senior management position. What I see from top, we have a long way to go to open our minds to accept that there is a different view, there's a thought process. You can't be thinking alike. And that is the beauty that leadership positions can get with diversity into it. So I think there will be a lot of work to be done. It's for the set of women who are here, I can certainly say that they have put in double the efforts to stand out in the positions that they are today. And it should become as simple as anyone else could be in that position for future, is what is my take on this. But we will see numbers increasing.
We will. Okay. Hanadi, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think again we should use this pandemic, the lesson learned, to push more on the D&I agenda, and this has to be conscious effort from the senior leadership of every organization. Women were the most hit during the pandemic because this is how most of that time it is. We're also the caregivers as well. So it was very hard for a lot of women to work from home and to care for anyone who got sick during that crisis. So we've seen many women dropping from the workforce. So there should be a very conscious decision from governments, from companies, to push the D&I and to bring back women to the workforce, to put back this work-life balance that should exist post COVID. So I think these are, and us, we have 4 amazing women leaders on this panel. So I think it is also our responsibility to coach and mentor female talent in our teams, to help them also reach senior positions. So I think we all have responsibility to push that agenda, the D&I agenda.
Megha, your thoughts on the same, and also, on I mean, for a while now with the pandemic, cost cutting, etc., hiring had also been on hold. So, how are you sort of addressing the talent gap, for the future?
So on the first part, I completely agree with you that the timing and what has evolved in the pandemic and the flexibility of work from home definitely provides a good platform for a lot of women out there. And I've heard many stories and encouraged many women to probably come back into the workforce now with all of that flexibility available. But absolutely agree with the other panelists. This is our personal responsibilities as women leaders, the responsibilities of, male leaders as well. It's not just incumbent upon us, but all senior leadership, and also a cue for large organizations to build that diversity construct. And I want to mention this, I very early in my career, when I was kind of promoted by one of my senior leaders, and somebody asked him that, why do you feel the need to have somebody in sales? Like it was quite a stigma, like whether women can actually perform in sales. So that person said that if I need to just hire people like me, then actually I don't need more people. I need people with different perspectives, different levels of empathy, and I need to create diversity of the mind, when you're actually leading organizations. So I think that sort of culture needs to come in leaders as well as in organizations. On the talent skilling, upskilling, and gap, Manu, I think this has been equally tough for everyone at all levels. Whether you talk about the mid-level, the senior level, the junior level. So as organizations, and particularly I can talk about Amex, we've invested a lot of time in backing our colleagues because at the end of the day, it was not an easy time at a personal level. So we wanted to ensure that mental health and well-being was front and center. And also at the same time, equipping our teams with the tools. Someone in the panel spoke about tools, right? You have to give the right tools to the team to fill up whatever gaps that start coming up. So whether it is virtual operation, whether it's kind of virtual selling, for example, in a sales team, which is just used to face for the entire career, suddenly has to start selling on WebEx. So, how do you coach them? How do you give them that sort of training? And very, very important has been mentoring and coaching. So we've adopted this policy in our team, particularly, almost like each one teach one. Whoever is good at whatever starts connecting with people, and you build that bond and that family, because you have to kind of find the strength within the organization. We have enough talent pool, frankly. We just need to kind of source the right talent for the right job, and just kind of move together.
Right. Before I bring in the audience question, this question to Ritu. Continuing with what Megha said, do you see things improving, at least on that hiring front, and in terms of upskilling, reskilling people going forward?
Right, and Manu, one of the many memes that became popular was that is this working from home or is this living at work? And I think there is an increasing realization that line is really blurred, especially for women. I do want to comment on your previous question, if I may, Manu. It's been our society's fault lines have been deeply exposed, right? And I think it would be not doing justice to this forum if we don't recognize that there has been research that has shown that women at mid-level have actually fallen out of the workforce. I would also say that diversity and inclusion is a big agenda for all forward-looking companies. And I think that's not just for PwC, the firm that I represent, but I'm sure many of the companies on this forum. I think the fact that diversity is important is no longer a discussion. I think there is now a series of actions that companies are already taking, whether it's active sponsorship, whether it's mid-level, induction, and then actively sponsoring the careers, whether it's providing flexibility, whether it's taking advantage of the work from anywhere model that the pandemic prove to the world that it can happen. And therefore, if one required any proof point, I think it was there for 12 months, at our doorstep. So therefore, there is an opportunity, there is a silver lining in all this. And I would just say to all the women who are your viewers, and all the men actually who stepped up and who took equal responsibility for household work, and women who did not step back from their careers but could manage, and these multiple balls in the air. Hats off to both of you sets of people who are listening.
Absolutely. Let me move into the audience questions. We've got a few that have come our way. So I'll start with the first one, and I think that's for Hanidi. It's from Gaurav Joshi, who wants to know, what do the panelists suggest for female entrepreneur? I assume in terms of what they should be doing, how they should go about building things. Hanidi, your thoughts? Sorry, I think you're on mute. You'll have to unmute.
Yeah, okay. So again, I think upskilling, reskilling, making sure you have the business acumen and also the accounting and finance acumen, that is very important. Look at the platforms that encourage and entrepreneur or have resources for entrepreneurs. Find a coach or a mentor. I think these are my main. But make sure when you want to have any business, to ask what problem is this is my company gonna solve, and see how much. I know a lot of people go into entrepreneurship, and that is great, but I think everyone who is looking into that also has to be very cautious, to do a lot of groundwork, a lot of research around his or her idea, the viability of the idea. So don't burn steps, I would say, and upskill, reskill along the way.
Okay. There's one question which has come to me. It's from Sukesh Shetty. Should the CFO focus towards cost cutting or sanction more marketing budgets for spending? Sandhya, would you have some thoughts on that?
I think CFO has to cut costs to sanction marketing budgets.
Okay.
It's all about prioritization of funds. I think take money out from where there is potential to take out and invest where it enables growth. So both have to go hand in hand. I don't think because we have a pandemic that we can deliver a poorer bottom line or lower cash or not enable the business for growth. So the CFO never has the choice between cost and growth. The CFO always has to find the balance. I think the one other aspect is that the channels are evolving. So the newer channels like e-commerce, or they're taking greater prominence. So an important skill the finance organization has to acquire is how to measure effectiveness of spends in these newer channels. I think that's a little bit of a learning which companies are going through, because we're well entrenched in the traditional channels and we've learned how to figure out value for investment. I think there is definitely scope for saving money in your marketing budget to find money for your marketing budget. But the choice of cost versus growth is never there at the CFO.
But I also wanted to know this other question, which is basically, how are CFOs taking advantage of, business cycles becoming shorter, and sort of building a resilient finance function? How do you do that? Same question to you, Sandhya.
So I think, for example, certain products. So one is that companies during the pandemic have focused on what they can produce and what the customer needs. So for example, say when initially the pandemic started, so the sanitizers was a big boom, but people already knew that the sanitizer business is going to be there only for a particular point in time. So it's a shorter business cycle product. Whereas maybe the company was doing a traditional product and that had a longer business cycle. And so I am not sure whether all business cycles have become shorter, but then certain opportunities have come up with shorter life cycle, which means the way the CFO looks at, for example, say costs. Now,
Right.
in shorter, pardon me,
Please go ahead.
in short, yes, pardon me, you said something?
Sorry, I don't know. There's disturbance. I was saying, please go ahead.
Okay. So in shorter business cycle products, the focus has to be more on variabilizing the cost, because we know, so the kind of sanitizer sales, say, for example, companies had in the first 2 quarters, now it must be like 1/10. So, which means that when we had originally conceived the business model for sanitizers, we couldn't have said sanitizers are here to stay. So that's the business insight that had to be there, that how do I build myself with agility, that when this wave stops and a new wave comes, am I ready for it? So I think CFOs have to play that role to balance that investment pattern of the business, be able to variabilize costs as much as possible, and be able to create value to what is matching the consumer demand and the consumer preference. And consumer demand is going to keep changing, but it's not because of the COVID world. It was always there, and it is always going to be there. So that's not a COVID response, but a business response, and the CFO has to play a co-pilot role in
Okay.
driving the business.
Absolutely. There's one question for Jyotsna. This has come from Tejveer Solanki. In view of the new normal, which one is a more viable option, outsourcing or own manufacturing? I assume he's talking about it, with supply chains getting disrupted and things like that.
Right. So, as Sandhya also mentioned, in the current environment and even otherwise, we have to focus on variabilization of cost, because with that you build the resilience, you build the ability to address the ups and downs in business. But as you're doing that, you really need to identify what is a core competency that you need to keep it in-house. You cannot outsource your core competency. And every function will have to do that. It's not just about a product or a manufacturing operation. Let's say if you pick up on finance, there's something core, which is your ultimate management report. Do you want to outsource that, or you just want to outsource your back office processing, data processing, or APAR sort of? So I believe there's no one answer to this, but yes, variabilization of cost is the right way to go about with it. So outsourcing is a part of it. Also, you cannot invest in all the possible technologies because the investments could be huge. So it is a better option to evaluate and lease or hire those technologies and be a part of their excellence rather than developing everything around you. So I believe more in variabilization of cost to keep a good level of buffering to your business shock absorbs, you can see.
Ritu, there is a question for you, and that's come from Mohammed Yunus. But what should those entrepreneurs do who've lost a lot due to COVID, and their businesses aren't going to be on track again? I assume, for struggling entrepreneurs, what is the way forward now?
So, not strictly a CFO question, but I'll tell you, Manu, firstly, it can be heartbreaking, right? I think one has to acknowledge the human reality of it. There's so much of passion and intensity that an entrepreneur puts into their businesses that there is a measure of heartbreak when that happens. On the other hand, the cold hard fact is, COVID or no COVID, there is a very high percentage of startups and entrepreneurship that do fail. And that failure, is taken as a part of doing that entrepreneurship and that startup. I think we all know it, right? And I think the world is full of examples of when, people fail that and they still stick to their ideas and stick to their guns and find the right support group and find the right takers, and they're able to rebuild it. Or in some cases, they take the learning, and they change the course and come back again when they can. So I think there's no easy answer. I think there is a human cost and a financial cost to that kind of a failure. But I think there should be a lot of heart taken in the fact that whether you're big or small or medium or whatever size one is, there has been that ups and downs, in the business cycle in the last year. So you're not alone. And I think that support and that community if one can reach out to, and there's plenty that is available for startup and people looking for viable investing options. I would say that opportunity is available to every entrepreneur who believes in their idea. So that's what I would say.
I think before we move into the closing comments from all of you panelists, we have one question for Megha from Mr. Mangalam Agarwal, who asked, post-COVID, can we expect a business model wherein there will be work from home-based workplace along with traditional workplace in order to increase overall efficiency?
I think it's it will really depend on the role. As leaders, we are seeing that work from home is very apt for a lot of type of roles. When it is like BAU, or when it is to do with a lot of back-end work, even our call centers have actually moved, home, which was an aspect which nobody thought that ever could, move to a virtual environment, and people could actually start interacting and taking, calls from home. So there have been places over the last couple of months where we have realized that efficiency parameters have flipped up. Because of the virtual environment, and opportunities have become larger for the workforces to come into that. But I think there are also places where we believe that the interaction, coming together of people in, on a constant basis is also very, very needed. So, for example, if you have to do innovation, if you have to do transformation, if you need to build, strategic infrastructures for the company to build, we believe that coming back full time to office may be a better idea, and always working on a virtual world may not fit in. But maybe there is also like a third part that sometimes couple of days at work and couple of days at home. I think that's also something that businesses are experimenting with. We have Ritu here, who's from PwC. I've heard that most of the consulting organizations have kind of got to that level where they're very comfortable with work from home a few days, and coming back to office a few days, and it's pretty much left to the urge of the employees to kind of come back and connect, and then be comfortable back home when they want to. So I think it's a mix and match. Really depends on the type of roles that we are looking at. But yeah, if you're saying that will there be more flexibility to this whole thought process, I think the answer is yes.
Absolutely. I think on that note, we can't take any more questions from the audience, but we'll just move to closing comments from all of our panelists. Maybe your thoughts on, as we are sort of at a point where there are concerns about a second wave within the country. Vaccination is still going on. We still things are uncertain. But considering all of this, if we look at the next year, and we've just started a new year, what are maybe one or two key trends that you see happening across workplaces and at businesses going forward in the next few months? We can start with Sandhya. We'll keep the answers short and then move around to everyone for their closing comments.
Yes, I think what COVID has taught us is that today it will be COVID, tomorrow it will be maybe some other virus. It's not about responsiveness to COVID, but how we evolve. And one particular call out I wanted to make is this entire concept of diversity. And many times, and I know it's a slight detour to your question, but I really want to land this message that we all think that diversity is about getting more women, but it's just not about gender. Multiple ethnicity, multiple academic backgrounds, like
Right.
Megha spoke about, part-time working, gig workers. The more we build more dynamism in our workforce, we make the ecosystem, the systems, the processes, the behaviors, the attitude, how we treat people who work with flexibility, work with different timings, could be anybody. I think the more we learn from what we've learned in the past 1 year working with the pandemic and build that into our way forward, we will create a much more dynamic, resilient organization, which will automatically attract more women, but also a more diverse and more contributing talent. And that's really the takeaway that we should take from what we've learned in the past 1 year.
Absolutely. Megha, your closing thoughts?
Can you hear me?
Very well, yes.
Okay, yeah, it wasn't unmuted. I think I would say that every person at every level in the organization has now the ability to have an entrepreneurial mindset. We have gone through a lot in the last couple of months, and that has also given us opportunities to acknowledge and appreciate out of the box thinking and transformation in a very, very big way. So I would say that, the learning for me, for my teams, for my organization has been that, as long as your heart to your business is very connected to yourself, you can really change the world, and there are lots and lots of opportunities that are available for you. So I think this has been a golden era in terms of learnings, in terms of leadership, in terms of transformation. So we must build on this.
Absolutely. Megha, your thoughts?
So at my end, if you see the past 12 months over the pandemic, what we saw the most emerging were two things which were visibly there: the startup culture or the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and it groomed amongst youngsters. They had nothing to lose. They had the courage. They had the ideas. So that was one thing which very visibly stood out. And these are going to be the future of any country, I would say. The second thing which very visibly stood out is the change that is happening, moving towards different channels, digitization, and so forth. So for everybody around organizational or work cultures, you'll have to have that agility to transform, to adapt, and move on. There is a huge wave of a new generation coming in. And if we are not going to really integrate that within your organizations with a forward-moving thought, the organization could suffer, or you could be left out of the organization. So it's critically important at this point in time to accept, adapt, and be agile. That's what I would really want to say my last message.
Ritu, your closing thoughts on how do we stay agile?
Yeah, I think how do we stay agile, and the two clear trends on that are, I think the business transformation and the nature of it is going to be big thinking, visible impact, and impatient. And I think all of that is the reality of the business growth and the reality of different scenarios that the businesses have to be prepared for. At an individual level, I do resonate with the comment that was previously made that there is an increasing sense of the mind, heart, and the purpose, the sense of purpose being aligned. And I think somewhere the companies have to value that individual, the employee, and recognize that needs to be also put at the center of the future capability and the future transformation building. So I think that, the individual sense of purpose and the business sense of purpose and the transformation journey, it's all getting integrated. And I think that should be the heart of the agility and the nature of the transformation in the coming years.
And finally, Hanadi, your closing thoughts on the way forward now?
Yeah, I think many of the points were already touched on, but I think a culture of continuous learning, be it from an individual level or company level. I think companies who will be sustainable are companies who will embrace this lifelong learning in their journey, and obviously rallying everybody around a common purpose. That also is very important.
Absolutely. So on that note, I think we are way well past our time, but it's been a fabulous discussion. And clearly, I mean, we could have continued this. There were so many different thoughts, diverging thoughts. But, since we're short on time, I think we'll have to end the conversation here. From all of us at Forbes India, thank you so much for taking time out. And we wish you the best going forward, especially amidst all of this madness and uncertainty that we've faced with. Thank you once again, ladies, for joining us today.